Good morning, everyone. My name is Siddharth Jain. I'm a co-committee member at IET VIT. I'll be the host for today's workshop, CyberRely, part of our ongoing quantum series. Have you ever wondered, with just one click, you can shop online, make online transfers, like a post on Instagram, and much more? As convenient and exciting as it sounds, have you ever wondered how unsafe it is to live in this digital era? Is our data well protected? Well, sadly, the answer is no. To help us tackle this issue, we have cybersecurity to our rescue. Cybersecurity is the art of protecting our networks and devices from unauthorized access. To give you a broader and a larger perspective to it, we have a very special guest amongst us today. Coming from a family whose two generations have served in the Indian Army, I take immense pride and honor to welcome our very special guest for today, Brigadier Jitendra Tripathi. Brigadier Jitendra Tripathi is the Vice President and the Head of Cybersecurity Operations at Reliance Jio Infocom Limited at Navi Mumbai. He is heading the SOC operations at Jio since May 2020. Before his present assignment, he was a brigadier in the Indian Army and has more than 31 years of prior experience in deploying, integrating, and securing field communication networks and information systems for supporting military operations in varied environments in Sri Lanka, Nagaland, Assam, Rajasthan, and even Ladakh. He is an alumnus of the prestigious National Defense Academy, and he has also done his master's in telecommunication engineering from the prestigious Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. Sir, we at IIT are extremely grateful and delighted to have you among us. The platform is all yours, sir.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank IET VIT for asking me to give this talk. Actually, about a week or so back, Milind contacted me and he requested me that I should give a talk to the students of VIT. So my first question was as to what is the expected topic. So he told me that he wanted to have some kind of a talk for the freshers or for the fourth year students, primarily related to the web security. So when he told me web security, in fact, it interested me a lot that today in this world, when we are going online in everything, almost everything, because of the pandemic, this was an apt topic to be chosen. And I agreed to give this talk to the students with whatever experience I had. But before I started, I thought, why should they be contacting me when I am into the industry when they are still in the college? I'm sure all of you must be having a course in the name of web application security, and your professors must be guiding you through that. So what he told me that they just wanted to have industry perspective so that they can put things in the right perspective. So with that in mind, I agreed for this talk, and accordingly, I have pitched this. I am not going to go too much into technology. I am primarily going to tell you all as to what are the kind of threats and vulnerabilities which you face as far as web applications are concerned. How exactly can you prevent them, and then what should be your overall strategy to secure web applications? So let me just share my screen so that we can just go through this. Yeah. Please let me know if when my screen is visible. Can you people see my screen? All right. So I get a message in the chat that my screen is visible. So now let me just go live. All right. Now, in today's world, after the pandemic, all of us have seen that almost anything and everything, all businesses are going online. In fact, there was a survey which was conducted by McKinsey Inc. And the survey was conducted for primarily with the executives of the companies across the world, across various industries, across various regions. And what came out that the adoption of digital technology and the online channel has been accelerated almost by 7 years. You all, most of you, for last 2 years have been studying online. The businesses have been working from home. Return to office is slowly moving in after the normalcy has crept in. But I can tell you that the hybrid model of working is going to stay, because now the companies are well well versed, and they understand that working from home is not going to impact the functioning. In fact, in most of the cases, it is going to increase the efficiency. The governments have also started giving their offerings, the public services, through digital platforms. Now, with that, the online being adopted so much, along with that, you also have a surge in the internet attacks. There was a survey which was conducted by the CDN Networks. CDN Networks is a content delivery network. And when they conducted the survey for the state of web security for the first half of 2021, you will be surprised to know that the number of attacks, as far as the web application attacks, they increased by a whopping 239% as compared to the same period in 2020. In fact, for that half, it increased. It exceeded the entire 2020. You can see the numbers: 10 billion attacks. Similarly, the attacks on the APIs, 253 billion attacks were monitored and blocked in the first half of 2021 itself. Now, if you see, that corresponds to almost 272 attacks per second. The DDoS attacks, with the bots now available, the commercial bots available to the attackers, the rate at which the data can be pumped in, 774.58 GPS. That is the speed at which the attacks have been launched on various websites. The number of bots, you see, that's almost 3.5 times, reaching almost 34 billions. Now, with that, even in particular, when we see the web applications, it has been noticed that the data breaches, the reason for most of the data breaches, almost 50% of the data breaches have been happening because of vulnerability in the web applications. In fact, one of the companies, I don't recall the name offhand, when they conducted a survey and investigations for the websites, and the websites which they tested, almost 50% of the websites had at least one exploitable vulnerability. And most of these were remotely exploitable. Now, as we move online, as we are embracing this digital technology, you as web developers and also responsible for the cybersecurity of your companies, whichever you join, you are not going to face cyber criminals alone. You may even be facing the state actors who are very well organized, and the cyber warriors who will be attacking the critical infrastructure of the country. In fact, if you see the recently Ukraine and Russia war, it all preceded with the cyber attacks being launched from both sides. Not only this, for the last 20 years or so, with this century coming in, almost every conflict has been accompanied and preceded by cyber attacks. And though we don't hear so much in the context of Ukraine and Russia, because the the physical attack, the kinetic attack has been so fierce and so devastating that you don't talk about cyber wars at this stage. But in case you want to look at an example of a cyber war, you should be reading the 2007 cyber attack by the Russian attackers on Estonia. Estonia is one of the three Baltic states along the Baltic Sea: Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. These were part of the erstwhile Soviet Union. And after the Soviet Union broke down, these countries separated. Estonia became part of the NATO, and this cyber attack was primarily triggered by an action by the Estonian government, one of the city administrations, wherein they wanted to move the one of the Soviet era statues from the city center to the one of the suburbs, which obviously was not taken kindly by the Russian attackers, and they launched full-fledged cyber attack on Estonia. And this was sometime in April of 2007. And for almost 1 month, the entire Estonian government and everything came to a grinding halt. Their financial institutions, banks, parliament, public services, everything. When initially started, they thought it is some kind of a ransomware and they'll be able to quickly recover from it. They started reacting after the attack came, about 4 or 5 after the attack started. They recovered it also once. But since it was a very, very well orchestrated and coordinated attack, the attacks persisted. And that was the result because of which the NATO came out with a Center for Excellence for Cyber Defense. Why I am just digressing a little bit from the topic of web application security here is, I want to tell you people who are going to be in this field, whether in securing web applications or who are going to develop web applications. Your attackers are not going to be some petty cyber criminals trying to attack your sites for some kind of a ransomware. That, of course, will happen. But in case you are working in a field which is critical infrastructure for a company like telecom, power, banking and finance, government, you have to be prepared for such coordinated attacks which can be orchestrated by multiple agencies together. And then you not only are protecting your own company's web application, you are actually becoming a cyber warrior and defending the critical infrastructure of your country. So look at it from that perspective, and just see what exactly we are going to cover, and take whatever you can grasp. Those who are towards the end of the engineering maybe and have taken this as a subject or cybersecurity as a subject, probably you will be able to grasp a little more. Others, just see whatever you can grasp. You can get back to this later when ever you are going through your courses. Okay. So what exactly are we going to cover? See, we will cover basically initially the web vulnerabilities, and there are varied kind of vulnerabilities which can be there in the web applications. You can start naming, and there is no end to it. Simple things. The first things where people talk about cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command injection, cross-site server-side request forgery, cross-site request forgery, whole lot of things. So where do you start? So I thought let's take a look at the OWASP top 10. OWASP is actually Open Web Application Security Project. This was started sometime in 2003, and every 3 to 4 years they come out with the top 10 vulnerabilities which have been faced and which have been attacked in the web applications. So we will cover that, and as we keep covering these vulnerabilities one by one, we will also cover in what way can you prevent these vulnerabilities. More so from not only from the technology perspective, we will take a look at the complete 360 view of it from people, process, and technology perspective, and see how it can be, each of these can be fixed. And then finally, towards the end, I will, with my experience, whatever I have observed and experienced, I will give you just a couple of points in one slide, which will be a concluding slide, which will give you a comprehensive strategy for your web application security. Okay. So this is it. As you see towards the left, this is the 2017 was the previous one, which was given by the OWASP project, and the latest came out in 2021. You see here, these are the type of vulnerabilities which have been listed. Starts with broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection. Each one of these we will cover in detail in subsequent slides. Injection. And based on what has been observed, if you see, certain things have also been combined. If you see here, injection was the top one. Because it was top one, I'm sure people would have fixed, the technologies would have been put in place, and because of that, the attacks based on injection have come down. Now this, if you see here, cross-site scripting was a separate category earlier, but now it has been clubbed with injection, because it is also like SQL injection, command injection. Cross-site scripting is also some kind of an injection which is happening in the application. And a new thing, because of the complexities of the web applications, a new category like insecure design has been added. The misconfiguration, this is the easiest thing, vulnerability which an attacker can find it out. For example, when you are doing a deployment, how often do you deploy components with your basic default passwords, or without even configuring the application as per your requirement with default configurations. And in case any vulnerabilities are known and your application has been deployed or not, the application component has been deployed with default configurations, it is so much easier for the attackers to attack that. Then the vulnerability outdated components, it is pretty much clear. Identification and authentication failures. If you see broken access control and identity and authentication failures, these two primarily, if you see, first you authenticate and then you authorize and then you audit. So we'll cover these in details. So each of these categories have been, so authentication, which earlier used to be one of the top ones, has come down because now people who are doing security have become wiser, and they generally ensure that the applications which are required to be authenticated, there is no resource which is left unauthenticated in case it is required to be done. Now, similarly, the other one, software and data integrity failures, logging and monitoring, and server-side request forgery. Now, before we proceed to each one of these, I would like to cover primarily, before you even do security for a web application, you should first understand what is a web application. Generally, people who are not into it, like developing the applications or securing it, they generally look at a website, what is visible. A website may be having a dynamic content or maybe having a static component, and then you get away with the idea that you just have to secure a website. Now, website is actually what it means, a site, a particular page, or maybe a couple of pages which are linked together. And a web application is much more, much beyond that. So and that is how these so many kind of attacks which can be orchestrated against the web applications. So first, let's take a look exactly how a web application looks like. Broadly, I'll give you a sample this thing, so that thereafter, when we talk about the security, you will be able to put things in the correct perspective. Now here, I have just shown a legacy web application, what exactly it is. You see, this side is, this is internet. You are sitting here on a browser, you browse, the request goes to the application, there will be a firewall in front, may or may not be there. Then there's a web switch. This is primarily a balancer, load balancer, because if there are far too many customers who are being serviced, it is not possible to service them from one particular server. So there is a cluster of web servers. So this, depending on the load, it keeps sending, and the algorithm which you have set, the web switch or the load balancer will keep sending the request to these web servers. And depending on what kind of service has been requested, there is a application cluster. The request will go to that particular component of the application, and it will be served, whether you are seeking an audio or a video or maybe some kind of information, a file, whatever services are being provided, that will be served by the respective application servers. Now that get pulled from the backend database, and it is given back the same way to the to your browser, where you can, which is rendered by the browser, that HTML page, and you are able to see it. So this is a legacy web application. Now, if you see in the present day context, the technology with the virtualization coming in, cloud coming in, so much of content being delivered online, obviously that kind of a architecture is not suitable because of the inherent delays and inherent scaling problems. So our modern application will probably, this is just a very, very simplistic view of a modern web application. In fact, when I was just reading through the internet, this is one of the diagrams which I came across, and then when I went and visited the website, this is I must give credit to Storyblocks Engineering. The author, this diagram before that, before he started explaining this, he said this is a typical modern web application architecture which is there, and if only I had known about this when I started as a developer. So though we get away with the idea, if there is a developer, he understands and he knows anything and everything about the web application. It is not that. You people, when you are going to develop any web applications, you will be doing a part of this complete architecture. Maybe one of you is working on the database, somebody is working on the web application, somebody is working on cloud storage, somebody is managing and configuring the network devices, the load balancer, the firewalls, the web application firewalls. Somebody is doing API development, integration. So you are all doing your work in small little areas, but it is always a good idea to have a complete word view of your application, what exactly it is going to do, what is the, and how, where do you fit in the entire puzzle, so that you understand that if there is a security flaw in my code, how exactly can it impact? It is not going to impact only my portion of the code or my portion of the application. It is entire web application which can get compromised. And with the as I brought to you, your company's reputation, the customer confidence, everything will be at stake. So it is important for you to have a complete view. Now, before we move on to the vulnerabilities, I must say that application development, whether coding or securing applications, is a very, very tedious, time-consuming, and and it takes a lot of energy. So you must have passion for it. You must, if in case you are a developer, you must have passion for coding, must have passion for development. If you are into cybersecurity, you should have passion for it. Only then you will be able to do justice to your job. All right, so let's start. We'll go. So this is going to be the main content of the talk which I am giving you. Primarily, all these type category of vulnerabilities which are there in the OS top 10, we will take one by one. What is the vulnerability, and how exactly I'll just, wherever it is possible, I'll tell you what can be the examples of the attack scenarios, and how exactly can you prevent this kind of a vulnerability. And thereafter, towards the end, I said I'll give you one comprehensive strategy from the complete people, process, and technology perspective. In fact, most of the technology will get covered during these OS vulnerabilities and their prevention itself. All right. So, what is broken access control? Now, broken access control, if when I told you, there's a triple A thing you must have heard about it, which is authentication, authorization, and auditing. So, authentication is, you say whether a person is actually what he is claiming to be. So that means you authenticate. Now, authentication can be a number of ways. You can have a password base, you can have keyword key base, you can have OTP, you can have a token, multiple ways. Once you have authenticated a person, thereafter you know that who he is. Then the access is given, which is role-based access. That means you are authorizing. So that is who's authorized to, what are you authorized to do, and you get access to only that much. And thereafter auditing, that is, you keep a track of whatever a person has been authorized to do, is he doing that only? So his actions get audited. That means the important security events, they get logged, so that if someone is doing something which is not supposed to do, it is that the record is available to you there to do when you are doing forensics and doing investigation. So in case of broken access control, what happens is, whatever an authenticated user, or in case a resource is being provided without authentication, he is able to do much beyond what he is expected to do or he has been authorized to do. For instance, a typical web application, there may be certain pages which are publicly accessible. For instance, when you are going online for shopping, when you are looking at the catalog and whatever you want to buy, there is no need for you to log in. That means everybody can actually can go through the various offerings. But if you want to buy, you have to log in. And then if you log in and you are able to do certain things, you can buy, you can cancel your order, you can update your particulars. So that is what you are limited to. But in case the application is being managed online, the portal, the administrators will have much more access to the portal. So they are having administrative access to the portal. Now imagine that there is a authenticated user who logs in, and he is only supposed to do whatever is authorized, but because of the broken access, because of the vulnerability in the application, he is also able to access areas which the administrators can access. Then he can do so much and change a lot of things which actually is not desirable. So broken access control is actually that a user is able to perform actions outside his own limits. Now, what all can it result in? What I told you, sensitive information which is supposed to be accessible only by administrators, he can access it. If administrators are able to, or maybe it is a business to business user is there, he is authorized to create records, delete records, but a normal user who is not authorized to do, he is able to do it. He's also able to impersonate as something else, or even forced browsing. You would have come across that in the underlying operating system there are files which he actually, for example, your password file. If at the end of the URL you give /etc/password, for instance, so he's able to see the content of the password file. Similarly, he's able to escalate the privileges. So these are the problems which can come in case of a broken access control. This is just one of the attack scenarios which has actually been given on the OS portal itself. For example, if you see that this is a parameter which is there, the statement, this has been set, and account is the parameter. This is being supplied by the user. Now, if this can be changed, and you, without validating it, if you run the query, if you're executing it, and suppose this is somebody else's account number, and if you do not validate whether it is valid for the current session for the current user, and you run further and get the data from the database. For instance, this is the attacker, he gives the admin account. Now you know that the session which has been established, he is not supposed to be the admin, and this is supposed to get blocked. But if you do not validate this and you get the query and the details are then available. How exactly do you prevent it? The first and foremost principle of security is you should deny anything by default. It is not true for this one only, but I'm just saying that this is the first and foremost principle of security, that deny should be the default setting in whatever you are doing. And there are, in your application, you will be doing the access control at a number of places. So what you should do is you should set up a mechanism, test it thoroughly, and make sure that you use and reuse the same mechanism all across or wherever it is possible, so that the chances of going wrong is minimized. Then wherever you are creating or deleting or records, make sure that there is ownership which is established. That means someone who does not own that record should not be able to delete it. Now, even if there is a broken access control, if you disable the directory listing in your application, even as a result of a broken access control, further directory listing will not be feasible. So these are the controls, which additional controls you are able to put, so that even if there is a control which has been broken, further damage is minimized. And if something actually happens, there should be a mechanism to alert the admins. If a normal user is accessing an area or doing something which is not supposed to do, there should be an alert mechanism in your application, so that a mail or an SMS goes to the admins, so that then they say, is there anything which is suspicious? Similarly, when the API communication is happening, make sure that when a brute force is happening, an attacker will try to do it a number of times. So what you do is, within a particular period, you put a rate limit. That means not more than so many requests from a particular source. So it will make sure that the automated attacks, the bot attacks, are weeded out. Then the most important thing is your tokens which you set, whether they are stateful tokens or they are stateless tokens. In case of stateful tokens, make sure that whenever a user logs out, that is invalidated. And in case of a stateless token, make sure that the time which you have given is very short-lived, so that the window for which it is available for any attacker to misuse it is reduced. Now the next category is the cryptographic failures. Now this is primarily when either you don't have encryption, or the encryption which you are using is not adequate enough. So how does it happen? Primarily, whenever you are encrypting, it is not possible for you to secure everything. Security is actually done based on the risk. There is a risk-based approach which is followed all across the security, not only for the web applications. The starting point is you do a business impact analysis. Now, what is business impact analysis? You see what are your business processes. Then what are your IT systems which are supporting these processes. So first you identify your critical business processes. Then you identify what are your IT systems which are supporting these critical processes. And then you put the security controls to secure it. And And to find out your critical processes, you have to first do a classification of your data. When you classify data, you will know there are three attributes for any data, which is CIA. That is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, not every data is required to be kept confidential, or not, but it may not be confidential, but you have to ensure, you may still have to ensure the integrity, that you are able to deliver the content which you intend delivering. It may be publicly available, but it should not happen that you want to deliver something else and the attacker is able to change that content and something else get delivered. Simple as the home page of your website. Now the home page is publicly available. There is no confidentiality involved in that. But definitely is integrity. If an attacker gets into, is able to compromise your website, he defaces it. That means the integrity has been lost. Defacing is an obvious thing, but certain contents, if they get changed, there is no integrity there. So integrity. Then availability. That is, you should be, at whatever point of time you want to present the data to the customer, to the user, you should be able to do it. So there are three aspects. Now, based on these aspects, you have to put your concerns. So if there is a data which is required to be kept confidential, whether in rest or in transit, you have to have cryptography in place. So, for instance, these days, you do not find any insecure protocol. Data in transmit, data at rest, we all understand. Data in transmit, that means whatever communication is happening between the client and the server, whether it is HTTP, SMTP, file transfer, that no one should be able to sniff it over the wire and get the data. So what do it? You secure it. So TLS is the process through which you secure these. So that is why these HTTP and SMT and FTP, they have all these are all clear text and not to be used. Right, like you have HTTPS, you have secure FTP, so that the data in transit is intercepted by the attackers. Now, reasons for this is basically weak cryptographic algorithms. You can see that in the last bullet, if you see the deprecated hash functions such as MD5 of SHA-1, these are very weak. They have been deprecated, not to be used. Though these are hashing functions. Similarly, there are crypto algorithms which have been retired, and you should not be using it. Similarly, the protocols which have been listed on the second, they should not be used, because then your data in transit is at risk. Also, the default keys and if you are not managing your keys properly, your certificate chain which is there is not trusted, where exactly the certificates are coming. If that is not trusted, the certificate itself can be modified. And in case you are encrypting the data, the initializing vector, when you encrypt it, though that has to be sufficiently secure and sufficiently random, so that it is not feasible for an attacker to decrypt your data offline, even if he gets hold of it. Now, this is an attack scenario. In fact, a couple of them which have been listed. Let's see them one by one. Now, there is an application, which stores the credit card data in the database. Now, whenever the application is retrieved, obviously it has to be decrypted, right? And in case there is an SQL injection which is there, is possible on the application, your data may be encrypted, but because of this SQL query, when it is queried, it is decrypted, and the unencrypted data, the record credit card numbers, they are made available to the attacker. So here, where the flaw is that you are decrypting the data automatically when you are retrieving it. you will have to authenticate whether whosoever is querying my database is he authorized to do it or not. Another example is, as I told you, it is most of the sites these days use HTTPS. But suppose in your web application there are certain pages which are not using HTTPS. It is only using HTTP, and the attacker, he scans your network, your application, and he finds out that some of the pages are being served in clear. So he can actually, when somebody is retrieving when an actual user is retrieving the data with those pages, he can intercept that traffic, he can intercept their cookies, and then he can utilize it to change the cookies, or even for that matter, in case suppose there is some serious data there, suppose there is an account which is supposed to receive some money, and that information is going in clear, he can even change the recipient of that money transfer. So you have to be sure that the secure protocols are being used all across your application and not only at certain places. Now, another scenario, this is thing though, when you are storing your databases, when you are storing your passwords, firstly, storing passwords in databases in clear is a big no. That is a sin. But even if you are storing it encrypted, or if you have hashed it, now in case you are not using, in case unsalted hashes are there, uh, it is highly possible to, in case it is possible to get hold of that data through some other vulnerability, it is possible to brute force that data through rainbow tables. Rainbow table is primarily, it is the pre-calculated hash of uh, generally available passwords, and you can read more about it. So primarily what is happening here is that you are not hashing, when you are doing the brute force, you are not hashing each password. The pre-calculated hashes are already available, and they are basically compared with the password hash which has been saved in your database. Only thing is, in this case, the rainbow table will require a lot of storage, which is not a major issue. So how do you avoid it? You can, along with the password, you can introduce a random string. That is where the salted hashes come in. So that even if somebody is able to get hold of your hashed password, he is not able to easily crack it. Now, most of these we have covered during the discussion in the previous two slides. So primarily, how do you prevent it? Firstly, you have to classify your data based on your needs, based on the privacy laws, what are the regulatory requirements, and what are the business needs. And so based on that, you know what is the attribute of the data, based on what is the level of confidentiality required, and integrity and availability attributes. Based on that, you design, you you apply a particular encryption methodology. And this is, again, as I said, you have to have, it is not only technology, it is the process and the people. Do not share sensitive data unnecessarily. Our data can be stolen only when it is there. Now, data which you don't require, why do you need to store it? If you don't store it, it cannot be stolen. So make sure that you have a retention and disposal policy for your data, as to till what time should you be storing your data, and after it is not required, how exactly it is required to be disposed of. Right? Now, all sensitive data must be encrypted when at rest, and ensure that your uh, password algorithm, protocols, and keys, they are latest, and they have not been deprecated. Use
Excuse me.
secure protocols for encrypting data in transit.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, would it be possible for you to reshare your screen? We might be facing a bit of lag, if possible, sir.
Okay. So which slide were you able to see?
So the last one that point with pointers and everything.
Okay, okay. Just let me see. Is it visible now? Which is this? Which screen are we seeing now?
So right now I am not being able to see any screen.
Okay, wait, wait, wait. Let me share the entire screen. Okay.
Yes, so now it's visible, sir.
So you can see this cryptographic failures and prevention, right?
Yes, sir. This is pretty clear, sir.
Okay. All right. So this is what I was talking about, that classify your data based on the privacy laws, the regulatory requirements and business needs, and accordingly as per the attributes which are required, use the right kind of encryption technology. Then I said, do not store sensitive data unnecessarily, because a data can only be stolen when you store it. If it is not required, do not store it. So have your retention and disposal policies in place. And when disposal is very important, it is something like if you have the physical form, if you have paper, when you have to dispose it off, you just don't throw away the papers. You actually shred it and you burn it. So similarly, in case of digital data, you have to ensure that it is disposed of. In case they are disked, they are demagnetized, they are purged, and you have to ensure that the data is actually removed and it is not accessible to anybody who is not supposed to see it. Then, as I said, you have to make sure that data at rest, all data, sensitive data at rest must be encrypted. You should use the latest algorithms, secure protocols, and have a key management system in place. So encrypt all data in transit. Use secure protocols. Use HTTPS. Do not use HTTP. Use SFTP and not FTP. Use SSH. Don't use Telnet. Similarly, now caching. When you are caching the data, it is actually you have stored it encrypted somewhere, but in the caching locations they may not be encrypted. So do not. Sensitive data should not be cached. Go and pick it up every time it is requested. It should be accessed from the place where it has been stored encrypted. This again is a repetition of the point on top, that security controls have to be applied as per the data classification and its attributes. Time and again, this will keep coming. And then whatever passwords you are using, hashing it, use salted hashing functions. This adds a lot of randomness and it is difficult to crack. And wherever encryption is there, use authenticated encryption instead of just encryption. What does that mean? Someone who has to decrypt the data, first he gets authenticated and only then he is allowed to proceed further to decrypt it, whether it is an individual or it is a process. Randomness is again something related to, for example, in hashing you are having sorted functions. The seed which is there for cryptographic, it should be adequately random. These are the deprecated functions, MD5, SHA-1, such like things should never be used in the present day applications. And also test the configurations and settings of various components, software components, hardware components, which are being used in your applications. This is how you will be able to make sure that there are no cryptographic failures. All right, now the next screen, injection. So can you see the next slide, injection? Or is there a delay? So since there is no response, I take it that this slide is visible. It talks about injection. Injection is primarily, you are the data which is being, this kind of a flaw happens when the input which is coming from the client, from the users, is untrusted data is sent to the interpreters, and it can be any kind of a command or queries, can be your OS commands, it can be SQL queries, or in fact, now, as I told you in the beginning, even the cross-site scripting has been also included in the same category. So the in this primarily what you have to do is do not trust any data which is coming from the clients. You have to validate it, you have to filter it, you have to sanitize it. So applications are vulnerable to injection attack when you do not do this. When you do not validate, when you do not filter or sanitize the data, you are likely to be a victim of an injection attack. Now, primarily you should be using APIs these days, and secure APIs. So these are the ways when the injection can happen. When the hostile data is directly being used or concatenated, you will see in the next thing, in the next slide, primarily in case of a SQL command, how exactly can it expose your entire database, a simple command, because of the flaw in your application. So this is a scenario. As I said, even SQL injection has been included in this this category. So if you see here, this is a simple SQL query which says that select from the account where customer ID is plus request get parameter ID. Now here this is being concatenated and the ID is being supplied by the user, by the attacker. So an attacker can actually craft your URL request which is coming in this particular manner. And if you do not validate this, and when you do not sanitize this request from your web application, web server goes to the database, and it actually exposes the entire records get exposed. They will be fetched here to the web server and are available to the attacker. Though this is a very, very simplistic example, I'm giving it here. There are much more complex scenarios, but this is one of the best ways if you want to read about SQL injection. And even there are websites which have been deliberately made insecure for you to test or practice this kind of attack, SQL injection, command injection, directory traversing. So this is one of the ways in which the injection can actually happen. So how do you actually prevent this? As I said, this is the era of APIs. The data is passed from one API to the other. It is consumed, action is taken, and given back to it. So make sure that the APIs which you are using are safe. Then the positive server side input validation, extremely important. Whatever data is coming, make sure that it comes in a particular form. The special characters are not there unless in a particular field or particular scenario they are required. And then the special characters need to be escaped depending on the type of interpreter. And even besides this, suppose in spite of all your efforts, there are flaws which still remain, and it is possible, at least use the controls, the SQL controls, where you can limit the number of queries which can come. For example, limit, and there are other controls, the number of records which can be disclosed at a time. That will limit the damage which can happen because of the cross-site script. You see, there are a number of APIs, number of pages which you are actually creating, developing. So in this scenario, it is best to do some kind of a automated testing and test each URL. each parameter, each header for this kind of a, for any kind of a injection scenario. And there are multiple ways to make sure that there are static testing, dynamic testing, interactive testing. Make sure that their automated tools are available, make sure it is utilized, and before the application moves into the production environment, it is thoroughly tested in an integrated manner, and a system testing happens for the application. And when you actually move to the web, to the prod environment, make sure that there is a web application firewall is in place. Actually, web application firewall does exactly what I am telling here. Even if you miss out on certain things, you can have the policies in place that if an attacker passes some kind of a malicious content in the requests, whether get request or post request, you are able to block it. The web application firewall blocks it. Now, insecure design. Now, this is a new category which has been used, which has been introduced by OWASP in OWASP 2021 top 10, primarily because of the complexity of the web applications which are being developed in this. There can be, number of reasons. Either the design is not secure, or there is no sense only. Things have been just put in place, and the certain functionalities are required without giving too much of thought to it. The application has been put in place, and an insecure design actually goes live. So what you should do, what exactly is there is, it actually, this particular thing is focusing on what is the threat. Now, not every application will have similar kind of a threat. So what is required is you do a threat modeling, and based on that, you design your application. There are web design models, there are which are available. Try and follow them, and make sure that even before you start thinking about developing an application, the design is frozen from all perspective, including the information security perspective. All right. This is just an example of an insecure design. Now, if you see here, now this is an application which is, there is an API which is there in the backend. What is happening here is that there is an insecure API. The attacker scans your application, is able to find that this particular this API is there, which is not using the organization's API gateway. Generally all our APIs are expected to go through a API gateway, and the security is ensured there. But the attacker is able to identify that there is a particular API which is not using that security gateway. So what he does is he injects the malicious script into the vulnerable API. Now, this is the starting point. So when a user visits and his browser accesses that API through the application, that malicious script gets loaded in the attacker's browser. Now, what is the flaw here? The flaw here is that this API, which was supposed to go through the API security gateway, somehow was missed out. Had it been going through the security gateway, whatever malicious content the attacker tried to inject would have got blocked. Now, how do you actually prevent these design flaws? This is primarily a very, very close interaction which is required between the development team and the application team. So when you are doing the designing, make sure that application security professionals, they are co-opted. And because while you are your expert in developing the applications, the application security itself is a Within information security, also application security is a very niche field and a very vast field. Make sure that the AppSec professionals are included because they understand what kind of controls are required at various stages. For instance, there is an application which is internet facing. Um you will require authentication. You will require a protection against bot attacks. You will require a protection against uh, uh, brute force attack, credential stuffing, such like things which you as a developer may not be too much well versed with, and how exactly to make sure. For example, a simple thing. Uh, if your page is there which is serving some content to people, and a denial of service attack, there is a bot which is playing out against your application. If you introduce a simple captcha there, you are introducing a human interaction. What have you ensured is that there is no bot which can actually flood your server with requests and carry out a denial of service. So, but if you do not think about it in the beginning, and if you face when you are actually deployed, it becomes a little difficult to implement. Obviously, you have to make sure that the user experience and the customer experience does not get impacted because of this. So they will be able to suggest and advise you what exactly can be done in a specific scenario. Then, when you are using web applications these days, there is very little coding which is required. Lot of codes which are actually required or are available on various repositories. You do a little bit of changes, and then most of the libraries they give you so much of functionalities. Make sure that the libraries which you are using in your applications, they have a secure design themselves. So do a threat modeling for various scenarios. As I told you, one of the scenarios which I told you, in case you want to weed out the bots. Similarly, how exactly you want to get, there can be multi-factor authentication. You're all aware there can be password based, key based, biometric based, it can be OTP based. And then what kind of access you want to give. Access, you have to ensure that any access which is given, there are two principles which are followed in information security. Firstly, it has to be least privilege which is required to be given, and it has to be role based accessed. And depending on various business verticals, whosoever is required to do whatever function should be given, so there should be which ensures segregation of duty. So thereafter you do a check, right right from the front end till the back end, from the when the request lands at the web application till it is serviced at the back end by your database or by the APIs, and the request do an end-to-end testing based on the threat model which is there. So that brings you to the integrated testing based on the threat model. Just make sure that the critical flows which are there, you test them, and you war game all the scenarios, test all the contingencies, so that you are able to address most of them. I will not say all of them, but because it is humanly not possible. In fact, by even machines also, it is not possible to test all scenarios. There will be vulnerabilities which will keep coming, and you will have to keep fixing. Just a word of caution here: it is not that you do this once and that is the end of it. Con- Security is actually a continuous process, and you have to be at it right from conception till it is the application is retired. The security has to be there at all times. This is what I was talking about. Depending on what exactly is the function of various tenants, make sure that they are segregated properly. One is not able to get into the domain of the other. Now, the next one is security misconfiguration. This is the most common flaw, and in fact, one of the most careless things which can actually happen. You yourself see that how many times when you are actually deploying applications or various components, how many times do you actually care to change the default passwords or the default settings? Very rarely. And that is where you are making, in spite of whatever you are doing, whatever we have spoken till now, all that goes for a 6. I'll give you a simple scenario. There was an application, a very secure application which was deployed, complete testing and all done, running for some time. In that, there was a uh, Tomcat server which was being utilized. Everything done, but that Tomcat server was used with default passwords. Now, what is the default credential of a Tomcat server? It is just Tomcat. Now, that when the attackers scanned, they found out, okay, out of so many applications and so many components, this particular component, this web application is running a Tomcat, and this particular thing is actually there with default passwords. Now, when somebody, so he's able to log into that application with default credentials, which is Tomcat, and he gets admin access to that particular application. Now, once he gets admin access, then he can do anything and everything. Then whatever you have done in your security, right from your design to whatever we spoke about, is of no use. So make sure that whatever components are being used in your application stack, they are hardened all across. The permissions which are there, please take a positive look at all the permissions, and permit only those things which are required to be permitted, and just deny everything else. Unnecessary features, applications which come, they are not, I'll not say applications, they are modules which are there which have got so many functionalities, but your application may not require all of them. So make sure that unnecessary features are not enabled or installed, because that is going to provide another attack surface for the attackers. This unchanged default accounts and password I have just spoken about. Another scenario would have seen is when you are visiting a website and there is a page which suppose you visit, it is not there. You get an error, error 404. Now, instead of that, an error message, suppose something, the greater details, along with that, the more details, more information is fed back to the browser. What exactly will happen? In response to your query, which was actually not genuine, response goes, the error message contains that yes, obviously this page is not available, and along with that you have given, suppose, the details of your server. Which server is it? What version is it? What in case PH there, whatever, what all versions are there which are running there. Now that gives an attacker, even though his first thing was he fired a query which was not correct, but in response to that you gave an error message which gave him a lot of other information. Now he knows what web server you are running, and then he goes and find it out, is this web server version, this version, has it got any vulnerabilities? He finds out that yes, there is a remotely exploitable vulnerability, and then he uses that vulnerability to exploit your application. So do not give more information in an error message than what is required. Similarly, next feature is make sure that the application components which have been deployed, whenever the security features come in, you update them, and whatever things are not required to be disabled, they should not be disabled. Same thing, the next bullet is also about the same thing, that all the application servers, frameworks, libraries, everything, make sure that this misconfiguration happens, that it has not been, the security values have not been set. So you have to make sure that it is set. These are some of the attack scenarios. You can just go through it. I'll just cover the first one. Suppose there is an application and it has got some sample pages are there. Sample applications are there, and those have actually not been removed. They are not required by your application, but they still stay there. And at a later date, some kind of a advisory comes that this particular sample application has got a particular flaw, which can be exploited by attackers. And if suppose that application happens to have some kind of an admin console, and if the default accounts have not been changed, the attackers will able to take control of that particular account, and thereafter they will be able to do whatever actions they want. So if this sample application, if it was not required and you had removed it in the beginning, even if this flaw came, then it could not have been utilized to attack your application. So this again, that principle what I was talking about initially, that make sure that do not install things which are not required by your application. Next scenario is basically in configurations, directory listing. You should generally disable it so that it is not possible for anyone to do a listing in case there is a flaw in any other component of the application. I hope we have enough time. Yeah. Okay, so this is how you prevent the misconfigurations. Most of it I have covered, but yes, make sure that you have a repeatable hardening process. Primarily, for example, if you have operating systems, have golden images in your organization which are properly hardened. If a particular version, say you want Windows, there is a golden image of a Windows server. There is a golden image of a Unix server that gets deployed. Similarly, the entire setup which you are doing, make sure that in all environment, whether it's a development environment or testing environment or production environment, make sure that all these environments are configured identically so that everything can be tested at each stage and you do not get surprised when the application goes into production. Then same thing, minimal platform, as I told, only whatever is required. Do not have unnecessarily services running, do not have unnecessarily feature installed on your for your applications. There has to be a patch management, because once the application goes live, there are multiple components, and with time, multiple vulnerabilities, multiple upgrades keep coming. Make sure that they are patched properly. Have a segmented architecture. Primarily, this is basically that even if there is
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I'm so
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, sir, but the screen is lagging again, sir.
well,
We're
don't worry.
having some.
No, not to worry, not to worry. Whenever that happens, just let me know so that we
Yes, sir.
can wait. Yeah, does it come?
Yes. So,
Okay. So what you were earlier seeing this screen?
yes, sir. This one, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So as I said, have so this you were not able to see when I was talking about it. So primarily what I was saying is that make sure that you have a repeatable hardening process. Your entire dev, testing, and production environment should be identical so that you do not get surprised when your application is deployed in prod. Have a minimal platform. That means that whatever is required, only that much should be there. No unnecessary services, no unnecessary features, so that if any flaws come on those features, vulnerabilities are there, those cannot get exploited, at least in the context of your application. Have a proper patch management system in place, because with time various components keep getting upgrades, and you must keep yourself current as far as patching is concerned. Segmented architecture, this is what I was talking about. That means you should have these zones. What is a DMZ zone, what is a trust zone, what is a user segment, so that, and also in case there are tenants, they are not able to move from one zone to the other, so that even if there is a flaw in anything, that cannot get exploited beyond a particular zone. Then you should always send security directives to the clients, that when you are responding, when the browser or the client gets the security directive, or otherwise through other channels, they are more alert, because they are also part of your entire ecosystem. And then, as I said, there are automated tools which are available to carry out the testing. The way we are doing it for the injection flaws, you can test the entire configurations of all the components which are being used. There are platforms which can actually run a complete scan and tell you where all the security misconfigurations are there, and you can address it. Now, next is again related to that, which is vulnerable and outdated components. So this is what I was telling you, is that your web application is not a single application which you have developed. There is whole lot of ecosystem which is around it. There are metal blades. There are virtual machines. On the virtual machines, there would be Dockers running. There will be lot of other applications. The servers, you say, suppose you got the Apache server, you got the middleware of the Nginx is there. Just giving an example. Then you have got a database. Then you have got multiple APIs which are there. You may be interacting with the third parties, your partners, and they all would be using various libraries and various software components, various runtime environments. Make sure, see, this problem happens when the patching system is not in place. So primarily what happens, that you have got vulnerable, unsupported or outdated software, and this can be, as I was telling you, it can be in the operating system, it can be your web servers, it can be in the application server, databases, API, all these. And if there is a component whose version you are not aware about, it may happen because you are not using it, you are using some particular library which is further using something. That means nested dependencies are there. Then you can't be sure whether it is updated or not. And in case it is not, you are not sure, that means it may introduce a vulnerability which you will not be aware about. So what is required is, you have a vulnerability management team in your information security vertical. Make sure that there is a regular scanning which is happening, and in case some shortcomings are there, in case any vulnerabilities are noticed, they should be fixed. And the other thing is, when you are doing an upgrade and first thing, because these days the upgrades keep coming so often that there is a delay, there is a lag. It may not be possible for you to fix immediately, so that lag is there, but then it still has to be in a timely manner. A simple example I will tell you, that when the CVEs come, they come with a CVSS score. Now any CVE which has got a CVSS score which can be exploited and remotely, and there is a remote hack which is available, that has to be an emergency fix. You cannot depend on your patching cycle. But those which are of the lower criticality may probably wait. So that is why it has to be risk based and timely fashion. You have to fix your components. Now this has what has been shown in the diagram is primarily what is happening is uh, there is an unpatched system. Our attacker is able to gain access in the system because it is not patched, and thereafter he is further able to exploit the internal resources. Just a demonstration, just a diagrammatic form of representation. What I told you earlier. How do you prevent it? This is no rocket science. Make sure that you have a patch management process in place, and wherever there are unused dependencies, unnecessary features, make sure that they are removed, and do not address only at the server side. In case you have a client side software, make sure you are looking at that also. And this is what I was talking about when this is the common vulnerability exposures, which are CVE. Most of you would be aware. Those who are not, this is basically this is taken out, and along with that there is a CVSS score which can tell you what is the criticality, and they also let you know in case the exploit is available it is openly available, so that you can actually fix it before it can get exploited. So you must subscribe to it. You have a system in place that you keep visiting it, and your team, whenever something serious happens, you are able to act on it immediately. In fact, this is April. Last 4 or 5 months, there have been a number of remotely exploitable vulnerabilities which have been coming. And if you recall, those who have been into it, who have been reading about it, the log4j is a logging component of Apache, which is this library, this open source library. Sometime in December, the vulnerability had come in, and this had a CVSS score of 10. And the cybersecurity professionals and the web application administrators, they have been working overtime to fix this vulnerability. We still don't know that how many percentage of servers have actually components have got fixed. So log4j is primarily, it is used for logging purpose, and not only in Apache. Since it is open source library, almost every single software uses this library. So overnight, every application became vulnerable to a remotely exploitable attack. So if there is a patching process is not in place, you continue to remain vulnerable till such time that things get fixed. So make sure that it is subsidized. It is you have some kind of a way to keep track of what all vulnerabilities are coming in and how exactly you are going to fix it. Then most important thing is obtain components from official sources and links. This I will talk about it during one of the subsequent categories when we talk about and make sure that the libraries and components which are there are current. There are no security flaws in them. Now, identification and authentication failures. Now, this, as I told you, the AAA authentication, authorization, and auditing. So, the first category which was there was access control. Broken access control was after the authentication has been done properly. Now, here in this case, the authentication itself has failed. And if that happens, it will allow the attackers to steal your passwords. It will take your session tokens, your keys, and the attacker will be able to assume the identity of a user temporarily or permanently. This will also allow a brute force or automated attack like credential stuffing. There are websites, firstly, there are a lot of passwords, a lot of credentials, username, password combination, which are available in dark web. Even of publicly hosted sites, I think one of them is you have been pawned something. It goes by that name. Uh, you can even try your username there, and you see whether your credentials are available there or not. So what I'm saying is that the password user base and username and password credentials are the big databases are now available. The bots are available. So the credential stuffing attacks are very easy to perform on a site where it is not getting handled properly. This is what I was telling you, that if along with the password you can incorporate say OTP based authentication, you will straight away make sure that the brute force attacks, they will be weeded out. If you don't want to customer experiences involved, you may even have a captcha there, so that at least there's a human interaction is enforced. Now these failures occur primarily because of the default password in case you're using, and weak password, well-known password. Now all those of you who are there on this, tell me how many of you actually use your first name as your password, some combination of your first name. If you are a little imaginative, you will suffix your first name with @123. Even more imaginative, you will make it 098, @098. Or probably because of the password policy says that you should have a capital letter also, so your first letter will be a capital P. And if you want to make it a little more difficult, you might have kept it of one of your family members. But then all these, if someone is known to you, so these are your pet's name or your neighbor's pet name. So it is immaterial whether it is whose name it is. So these are very well-known passwords which are there, and dictionary-based attacks can be done against those. So make sure that wherever it is there, certainly in case of applications, the passwords have to be strong. Default password definitely have to get removed. And another thing is, when you are using ineffective credentials recovery, when the password, suppose in case you want to recover your password, there have to the mechanism has to be, you have to test the complete flow for the recovery of the password. In case you want to send the OTP to two different places, make sure that there are two different OTPs. Suppose there you want to send, if you have permitted a reset of a password, you say okay, OTP will go to a mobile phone, it will also go to the email ID. Suppose that email has already been compromised, and you are sending the same OTP to both the places. Even though I don't have the mobile, I have the access to the email, and I'm able to change the password. Thereafter, the actual user loses control of his account, and the attacker is able to gain control of it. So you have to test the flows carefully, what exactly is possible in case of a password recovery. So then this, for example, this knowledge-based answers. Number of cases when you actually are asking a reset, there is a security question which is asked. Now that security question cannot be a knowledge-based thing, because that based, if you know a thing, if it is a knowledge-based answer, anybody else would also know. So make sure that such kind of checks are not there in the systems. Another flaw, again related to unencrypted, where the encryption failures, that you are storing the password in either in plain text or it is weakly hashed. Then, or you either you don't have multi-factor authentication, or you don't have it is a weak one. Now, what is a multi-factor authentication? There are three things in authentication. I'm sure those who have read about cybersecurity would know that first is what you know. What you know is primarily something like your password or your key, in case it is key which is there on your machine. Then second thing is what you have. What you have can be a mobile phone on which the OTP is coming. Then what you have is a token, a hardware token which you have, you can put it. And the third thing is what you are. That is where a biometric thing comes, where your iris scan or your thumbs, your fingerprint is taken. So these are three different categories of uh, authentications, multi-factor authentications. You can implement two of them. The most sensitive things, though it is, I have not seen in commercial implementation more than two of them. But you can, but make sure that you choose one from each category. Now it cannot happen that you have a password and you have a key. Now both are same. You know what you know. So that is not multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication has to be what you know and maybe what you have. Now, how you prevent it? You have multi-factor authentication. This we have been covering. When you are shipping or deploying, make sure that the default credentials. If you see there are maybe if you do about 10 to 15 things right in security, you will be able to secure your application. And that actually will become our comprehensive strategy for securing web application when we cover in the end. Do not have default passwords. Weak password check should be carried out. You can have automated applications. We can do this check for you. This enforce password length, complexity, and rotation policies. You know that password should be minimum, say 8 characters. It should have a capital and a small and a special character and a number, and you enforce some kind of a rotation after 90 days, 30 days, depending on whatever is the uh, criticality involved. Then uh, ensure that whatever login failures are happening, they are logged. And in case there are too many things happening, there's some kind of a alert which is sent to the administrator. But logging has to happen even if there is one failure. You know, it may be inadvertently happening, but in case of any forensic investigation required, you should be able to uh, go through those logs. So make sure that the logging. So this, in fact, is actually one of the separate categories, proper logging and monitoring. We'll go through it later on. Now, software design and integrity failures. I think this is the third last. Thereafter, we left with two more. Now, this refers to primarily, you know, the this is a very interesting one when we see this. Primarily, you know, what is happening is that the infrastructure which is there, your it is not when you are having the software updates or when the CI/CD pipeline continuously integrated and continuously when you are deploying the pipelines, you are not implementing proper verification and authorization there. Because of that, insecure code can get introduced in your CI/CD pipeline. If you see recently, there was an attack of the SolarWinds Orion software. I think it is there as one of the scenarios in the next slide. We'll talk about it. A very interesting case, and that was primarily because the CI/CD pipeline and actual genuine updates which came from the company, those had malicious content in it, and all organization who had that software, they got infected and attackers could get access to it. So that is why when your updates are happening or being downloaded, make sure that there is sufficient integrity and verification is done before uh, the updates are applied. And also, whenever there is a serialization happening, make sure that there is no you should not send serialized data to the unknown or untrusted customers, to untrusted clients, because they can change that serialized data and send it back to you, and when you utilize it, you can get a victim of that. So no data to be sent to untrusted uh, clients. When I say client, it is the browser or the client application. Now there are two attack scenarios here which have been listed. First thing is update without signing. These days the routers, set-top boxes are there in your home. You have taken the internet connection. These days, even TV, etc. Your set-top boxes, everything is running through the internet. The firmware updates which happens there, it is done without any kind of verification. If that happens and some kind of a malicious content goes into it, then you actually cannot do much about it. And the only remediation is that you fix it by a new version. That is because it is being done without signing in. So that was an easy thing, and which may not be having too much of an impact. But I'll just talk about this SolarWinds malicious update. This is a SolarWinds Orion platform. This is primarily monitoring applications monitoring and management platform which is there, and it is used by a number of organizations. So it is suspected that one of the nation states, it actually compromised the servers of the SolarWinds, and from there they planted malicious code into their Orion platform at their site. Now, thereafter, whenever the automatic updates which you receive, the Orion platform, these 18,000 organizations which were customers of this platform, when the update went to these, and for months these updates kept going, the malicious software was pushed to all these organizations. And as a result of this, the attackers, and because it is a monitoring platform, it has administrative access across the network. So the attackers were able to gain administrative access on the networks of all these organizations. Not all these, but most of these, wherever they had reachability. Now, there is no vulnerability in these organizations, the victim organizations' networks or in their applications. They were taking updates from the Orion platform directly. But this itself, the supply chain was compromised. So such like scenarios can happen, and that is what I'm trying to say, that the attacks will not be primarily for ransomware or by some criminals. It can be by state actors, and you have to be prepared for this kind of scenarios also. Now, this is what we have primarily talked about, that any kind of updates which are happening, make sure that there is a authentication and mechanism and verification mechanism to make sure that no untrusted repositories, no untrusted components creep into your system. And wherever there is a higher risk profile, make sure that you have your own internal good repository. This is what supply chain poisoning, which we just talked about. Make sure that you verify whatever is coming into your organization. The others are we have talked about in the previous slides. Logging and monitoring failures, very important. I think this is the second last one. Yeah. Extremely important. Once you have put your application in place, you have put whatever controls are required. In cybersecurity, there are primarily three kind of controls. There are preventive controls, detective controls, and then corrective controls. So you have put the preventive controls in place, but you have to have detective controls also. Now, how do you have detective controls? How do you detect? You have to first do logging, and then you have to monitor it. So, in fact, I was going through one of the articles. It said that it takes an average of, I think, 187 or 287. I do not recall the figure. Those many days to actually detect, on an average, to detect an attack, to detect a breach. Now, this maybe the figure appears to be high for those because a lot of companies do not do security at all, or do not do it in the manner they are required to do. But what I'm saying is, in case you want to detect and you want to proactively be at it, you have to make sure that your logging processes are correct and there is a monitoring which is happening of the entire information environment of your organization. That is where the security operations center comes in. There are the logs from multiple sources, they come in on your monitoring platform. In fact, SIEM, you must have heard, security event incidents and event management systems, and SOAR platforms. This is primarily security orchestration and response platforms are there. You integrate your application logs to those so that you can proactively monitor it, and if something gets noted, you are able to respond to it very quickly. Now, why do these, in case these failures happen? Because the security logs which are there, firstly, you are not logging in properly. You are not logging it properly. That means all the failures which are happening, not only failures, even successful login should also be should also be logged. For instance, if there is a user for which there have been 10 continuous failures and then the 11th one has been a successful login, then you know that someone has brute forced your password and finally he has succeeded also. So these SIEM platforms actually, there are rule cases which say, okay, within 5 minutes, in case there are so many failures, an alert should be raised. And it can be seen and acted upon whether it is actually an attacker who is doing it, or maybe some kind of a script which was configured and the password has expired and it is failing. Similarly, as I said, either these events are not being logged or you're warning and error messages, either they are inadequate or they are not there at all, or whatever they are logging, the message is not clear. Your API activity is not being monitored, and the logs are stored locally only. Now, if the logs are stored locally, if an attacker gains access to a system, he can actually modify the logs. And in the worst case, he can even delete it. So the logs cannot remain on the same server. They have to be taken away from there so that you can do, you can firstly do monitoring, and you can also do forensics later on when it is required. Then I said appropriate alerting mechanism. When a threshold is, this is what a SIEM platform can do, where you have use cases where the abnormal behavior is noticed, the alerts can be raised. How do you prevent it? This, as part of the discussion on the previous slide, primarily we have been talking about. Make sure that everything is logged. All security, your AAA events are logged and they are taken to a central platform. Then the logs should be in a particular format, which can be a standardized format, so that it is easier for you to derive the intelligence from that. These points are self-explanatory. You can just go over it. Most of these we have spoken about in the previous discussion. All right. Now this is the last flaw we talked about, server-side request flows. Now what happens here is primarily that the server is actually whatever information is, whatever request is coming to it, without validating it, it is executing it. So if you read this, these occur when a web application fetches a remote resource without validating user supplied. Now what is being actually, what functionality is being abused here? That the server has got the capability to access internal resources. However, before you access the internal resources, you should be validating what request has come to you from the client browser and whether it is a genuine request or not. If it is not being done, then this server requests the internal resources. Whatever information comes out, it is given back to the client, and the security controls which have been put in place, whatever you have done, your firewalls, WAF, everything is there, because the server's functionality is being exploited. As far as those controls are there, this is a genuine action, and it has been the internal data which is not required to be exposed get exposed to the attackers. It can result in a number of things. It can sensitive personal information or corporate information, or even the data can get manipulated, or the entire thing, a system can get hijacked because of this. If the pipeline is injected with a malicious script or malicious code. This is just trying to give scenarios that a server is there. It is authorized to do this kind of a internal scan. Now, in case of this, there's a request comes, and based on that request, it does carries out a scan of the internal network and gives a response back to the client. As a result, the attacker will be able to know as to internally which all ports are exposed on various servers. So while this server is authorized to do internal scanning, it is not expected to give a response outside. This functionality has been given to this for a different purpose. But because of server-side request forgery, this functionality of the server and authorized activity has been exploited, and this information gets leaked to the attacker. Same thing, sensitive data exposure, as I told you. So, for example, the server has been authorized to access a remote server for any functionality which is required to do, but that is utilized to fetch a particular file, say of the password file. Then your metadata, if you see on the cloud, this is the IP which you see. The metadata on the cloud is stored. It can be accessed internally on this particular IP. Now, if the SSRF succeeds, an attacker from internet will be able to access the metadata through that server on which the SSRF has been executed. And then further, you can even do a remote code execution or a denial of service attack in case this succeeds. How exactly do you have to secure it? There are two parts to it. You have to do defense in depth. That is, firstly, segmentation. At the network layer, make sure that your network is segmented, so that even if something happens, the impact of this server-side request forgery gets reduced. Then, as I keep saying, deny by default. Whatever is not required, so whatever is allowed should be allowed, express allowed should be there, and thereafter, by default, make sure that things are denied. At the application level, this is what you can do. You can sanitize the input which is coming, make sure that this is a positive allow list of what a client can do and what he cannot do. Whatever is not in the allow list is not allowed to do it. Raw responses obviously should not, if they are not sent, at least your data doesn't get exposed. All right. So this is what. So now we come to end of the vulnerabilities and prevention part. We'll be talking about a comprehensive strategy for securing the web applications. It is primarily a summary of whatever we have spoken. But before that, if you see what I was telling you, that these are the areas which you should be focusing for the security of your web application. This is at various stages. If you see, this is the browser here, and from here you are traveling towards the various tiers of your web application. What is expected? Authenticating the users. You have to protect the sensitive data. Then parameter, you have to prevent parameter manipulation, session hijacking. Make sure the configurations are correct. Any input which is coming from here is validated. Once authenticated, make sure authorization happens as per the role which is there to the user or the service or the application. Any exception which happens should get handled here. And thereafter, you can keep proceeding, authenticating, authorization, auditing, and sensitive data, how you are going to protect, encrypting, and all. So primarily, these are the things in nutshell you have to do to protect your application. So what is that strategy? How exactly should we doing it? Yeah, I hope this slide, the final slide, comprehensive strategy for web application security, it is visible. In case I don't get a response, I take it that all of you can see it. All right. So, security of web application is only one part of the security. However, uh, today the web applications are the main is a major way in which you offer online services, right? So, firstly, the management support. There has to be a culture of cyber security in the organization, and there has to be a management buy-in. That means the top leadership has to give importance to cybersecurity, because cybersecurity in the normal thing, it is actually at a variance with everything else, because it is actually it may be a little problematic, it may be a nuisance, to if I can say that, because it brings in a lot of restrictions, and the advantages or the benefits it gives you may not be tangible, they may be intangible, so it may be very difficult to comprehend as to why we are doing this. Why are we blocking access to our people to particular set of websites? Why are we not giving full fledged access to the internet to people? Why are we putting so many controls in place? But because of the reasons which I told you, you all, I'm sure, appreciate now that yes, it is required. So the manager has to understand that cybersecurity is a must for the reputation of the company and for customer confidence. So that is the first thing. Thereafter, once there is a management buy-in, make sure that there is a sound security for foundation. Now, what does that mean? That there has to be a comprehensive information security policies covering all aspects of cybersecurity. Uh, as I said, there are multiple functions: vulnerability assessment, baseline assessment, application security, logging and monitoring, architecture review. Uh, so there have to be detailed cybersecurity policies for each one of these, so that everyone, the developers who have to do it, they know what exactly, and the developers and the administrators who have to do, they know what is expected of them. So make sure that the foundation is strong. Now, thereafter, let's come to the web applications as such. So incorporate security requirements at the application conception stage itself. That means, when initially you are conceiving the application, there is a lot of requirement gathering going on. So not only the functionalities which you have to include, make sure that what are the security requirements which should be there, those should also get incorporated at that particular stage itself, so that everyone is aware as to what level of, if there is, what is that, what kind of data you are storing, for how long are you storing, what are its attributes, so it will require what kind of integration, so what kind of encryption, in case it is customer facing, which all urls, which all apis need to have authentication, which will have captcha, where all should we have multi-factor authentication, such like things. Then at the design stage, you have conceived the application, requirement gathering has been completed. Now when you are designing the application, make sure that you co-opt the application security professionals in the application, so that you get the design right in the beginning. Otherwise, if you design the whole thing, and after that, once you get a review done, you find that there is a lot of things are missing, then you go back to the drawing board again, and it causes a lot of pain. So make sure that right in the beginning, if you incorporate the application security professional from the infosec vertical, they'll be able to guide you for a secure design, and you will be able to design an application which generally will be able to meet the security requirements. And once you have designed designed and developed the designed and created the architecture for the application, make sure before you start developing the application and before you start doing anything, have an architecture review done, proper architecture review done by your application security team, so that they are on board, and because they can look at things from a different perspective. And if there is anything required to be fixed, or any functionality, security functionality required to be added, that gets added right in the beginning before you even proceed to start coding. Then the foremost important thing after that is train the developers in secure coding. Now, as a developer, what is his intent? As I told you, you are doing a small part of their application. Your intent is to provide a particular functionality. It can be provided in a number of ways. Obviously, you will look at the most efficient way, but then make sure that that most efficient way also is a secure way. You are not there is no security flaw which is creeping in because of your part of the component. So training the developers in secure coding is a field in itself, and I'm sure all of you must have taken some kind of a subject which talks about secure coding. Then there are different ways of developing software. Earlier you used to have the waterfall model of developing. That means you design and then you develop the complete code, go stage by stage, and then do the. But once a stage is passed, it is very difficult to go back to that. Now the development is agile method of application development. That means you develop short, small codes, and you test them. These are called sprints. So what you do is you make sure that when you are doing the testing, you do the security testing in each sprint, so that in case any security flaw is there, that you can fix it then and there, and later on it doesn't cause you as much of pain which you could have done it in the beginning. Thereafter, once the entire application gets tested, gets developed, have a testing environment, system integrated testing, SIT environment, where the complete application gets tested as a whole before it is moved to the production environment. And what we had discussed earlier, make sure that you configure all your environment in the similar manner. It should not happen that the development environment has got limited controls, testing has got some more, and the prod has got. If you have all your environments configured similar, firstly, you will make sure that everything gets hardened right from the beginning. Secondly, you will be able to test all your controls right from the beginning. So configurations of all the environment should happen similar. Then, as I said, there are multiple components which you are using in your application besides what you are developing. Make sure that there is a minimum baseline security document which is generally given by the vulnerability management team. Make sure that it is in place and you are following it. Then is the integration of the security logs. This is where all your logs which are getting generated, firstly there has to be standardized logs. There is a log standard document which is generally maintained by companies. So any application which get developed, it is supposed to print the logs in a specific format. It makes sure that minimum thing that the timestamp is there, who's the user, at what time did he log in, what was the request which came in, what was the response. All these things get printed in the logs. So all the logs of various components, whether it is operating system, your web server, application server, your middleware, database, all the logs, they should get integrated with your SIEM platform for monitoring and alerting. Thereafter, you establish, thereafter you move now your application, once it has been done, it goes live, it is in production environment. However, as time goes by, there can be a number of vulnerabilities or updates which can keep coming in various components which you have deployed besides the web application. So make sure that you have a vulnerability management and patching program in place which is regular, and we just talked about it So whatever is critical emergency should get fixed immediately. Others which are not as critical, there has to be a patching cycle which is there, and make sure whatever you are getting is coming from a trusted source, and it is verified before it is pushed into production. Now, similarly for vulnerability management, there is another thing is called penetration testing. You should have your own penetration testing team, which will keep testing your application. They will attack like hackers and see is there anything which we missed out, or is there a new vulnerability which has come up in any of these components, and it has not got fixed and it is possible to exploit it, so that you can proactively fix it. And the final thing is, in spite of your PT team, make sure that you have a bug bounty program. And I'm sure all of you, some of you who are actually keen on security must be, as part of a bug bounty program, you must be participating in it. So this is primarily, you are allowing responsible researchers to attack your application, and in case any flaw is found, they disclose to you responsibility and you reward them. And once that happens, I'm sure because of the if you have this kind of a strategy in place, you will be able to fix most of the problems of application security. I will not say all, because as I said, it is a continuous process and you have to be at it always. And in spite of this, in case something comes up and an attacker is able to get into a system, you have your monitoring system in place. You are able to detect it and you are able to respond to that, and you are able to evict him and then actually patch your system and recover from it, and the operations can run normally. So that is it. I have to say about web application security. I hope that the session was useful and you people have gained something from it. And anything you want? So now I think we can be open for questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session. I'm sure you've kindled a sparkling desire amongst our viewers about cybersecurity and its applications. A lot of the attendees have questions regarding this domain. In this upcoming Q&A session, we'll be taking those questions one by one. The first question is asked by Adi Kulkarni. How would have log4j vulnerabilities affected current systems if not detected?
See, log4j, the vulnerabilities, primarily what the vulnerability was, that log4j is a logging mechanism. How exactly it was playing out is that the commands could be injected into the URL. For instance, you have your operating system is there, your host name, your Java version. This kind of command could be could be injected into the URL, and the attacker would be able to know. And the response goes, actually, what happens is a response goes to the DNS server, and as part of that DNS query, it goes to a server which has been hosted by the attacker. And once that thing gets revealed, so this is just one example I'm saying you, there can be multiple. This is multiple ways in which it could have been exploited, but this is one of the ways. For example, what is the version of your Java, what is the version of your operating system, and once known that could have been further been exploited for, in case any vulnerability is there, that could have been further exploited.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's have the next question, please. The next question is asked by Kopal Rawat. What do you mean by brute force in the context of cybersecurity?
Brute force is actually what it means in English. What you are using, basically what you are doing is that there is a user, you want to guess his password. So you keep spraying the passwords one by one, and hope that one of them succeeds. So you are doing a brute force. For instance, say the user is there. So let me say who asked this question. It was Kopal Rawat, right? Uh, so suppose you have a password. Your username is say Kopal Rawat. I say Kopal Rawat, and thereafter I keep spraying. There is a dictionary which I told you that dictionary of password is easily available on the internet. I have a script, and one by one it starts spraying that username, and it picks up one of the passwords from that dictionary and throws it. If it doesn't succeed, then it picks up the other one and the other one, and so it is trying to brute force. And finally, it hopes that one of them succeeds. So that exactly is brute force in the context of cybersecurity.
Thank you
I
so
hope
much.
that answers the question.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is asked by Harshad Sardar. What do you mean by shoulder surfing?
Shoulder surfing is primarily it is primarily you are surfing and somebody is standing behind you and he sees what you are doing. That is shoulder surfing. See, all these words which have been taken in cybersecurity are very, very self-explanatory. It is primarily what I told you, that you are sitting at a place, you are in a cyber cafe, you are logging into an application, and suppose uh, your college website, there is a username, or why cyber cafe in your college. You are sitting, and from one of the public places, your libraries, you log into a system using your username and password, and one of your colleagues is sitting behind you and he is looking over your shoulder and he sees the username and the password. That is shoulder.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's have the next question, please. The next question is asked by Bhavika Panjwani. Are open source tools like Wireshark secure? Would you choose proprietary tools over open source tools?
This is a very see. Firstly, I will not propagate any proprietary tool. Uh, Open source has got its own advantage. I'll not talk about a tool as such or Wireshark as such. Open source is a very strong community. The tools keep getting developed, and in fact, we are at a stage as far as internet or information, not only security, anywhere, even your development, web development, or any development, we are where we are because of open source. But it has got limitations. Community source things, at times they may not get supported to the extent you require. So in those contexts where you have got mission critical things, you may like to go for proprietary software, but make sure that that proprietary software is does not have any kind of a malicious thing in itself. When we say uh, because open source, everything is open to you. So if you take an open source software, even for mission critical things, at least you know and you can configure it in the way you want. But however, you have to be prepared that uh, you may not have the kind of support which is required for it at a later date. So you should be able to transition in that case. So I am a very strong advocate of an open source tool vis-a-vis a proprietary tool.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's have the next question, please. The next question is asked by Shrisha Podar. What are botnets and honeypots?
Good, actually, it's a very good question. Actually, thank you for asking this question. This is one of the things which I missed out, and I must have included this as one of the comprehensive strategies for cybersecurity. Have a honeynet or a botnet in place. Now, what exactly it is honeynet is something. You have a site, like you have got your web application. The attackers are going to attack it. When you have a honeynet, uh, you have similar websites or similar URLs in and around your around your application, and you deliberately put in some vulnerabilities there. And the attackers, when they scan your network and they see, because your application, you have made sure that the application is protected, and he finds the vulnerability in your honeypot and he starts exploiting it. Right, firstly you have made sure that you have this is a basically deception. You have deceived the the enemy, the adversary from going to your actual application. He has come to the bot, right? Now here you are, do not block him, or do not try to evict him. Make sure that you just keep observing him. What will you do? You will find his TTPs. What is his technique and what is his tactics? How exactly is he proceeding to attack the applications? This will give you a lot of insight into his tactics, and you will be able to further secure your application based on that. And in any case, you have been able to deceive him to get it to the honeypot. Primarily, this word probably has emerged from the Cold War and the Bond movies, where the honey traps used to be done. So you are actually trying to honey trap the attacker into the honeypots, safeguard your application. At the same time, you are able to uh, know what exactly his tactics is for your future actions. So that is it.
That was really informative, sir. Due to limited time constraints, we'll be taking only two more questions. So the next question comes from Milan Gandhi. What do you mean by tracking cookies? How do you prevent them?
Uh, what do you mean by tracking cookies and how do you prevent them? So I take it that the question, there are two parts here. One is what are the tracking cookies and how do you prevent? Uh, okay, let me talk about the first one. Maybe that will clarify the thing. Primarily, what happens that when you are browsing, suppose this is a simple example. There are session tokens which are created. For instance, when you log into your say your college website, there is a username and password which you have supplied, right? Now that is, you have done it once, and thereafter you are moving from a page to a page to a different application if your this thing permits a single sign on. So there is a cookie which is there, which has been supplied to your browser, and that cookie is actually utilized, and the server sees, and whenever you send a session request, that cookie is supplied by the browser to the server, and it sees whether this is he the same user whom I have authenticated and is authorized to do it, and then he allows you to go through it. So your server is actually tracking the cookie. The cookies can be of two types. As I said, it can be stateful or it can be stateless. In the stateless one, it is basically a timed cookie. It is valid for a couple of minutes, or depending on what kind of experience you want to give. It is not very critical. It is internal network. Even you can have it for hours. So that is how you maintain these sessions. So that exactly is tracking cookies.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we'll be taking the last question. So the last question is asked by Sana Arora. Which is more reliable, SSL or HTTPS?
What is more reliable? I think uh, I would rather say you should have asked. This is SSL is actually secure socket layer, and the advanced version or the newer version of that is the TLS, the transport layer security. So HTTPS and all use that. So actually SSL is a older version, and it has got evolved to TLS, and TLS is the one which is used whether it is in HTTPS or in SFTP or others. And even in TLSs, there are versions. The latest version, I think 1.2 or which is the version. So you should be using the TLS.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with all your knowledge. We've reached the culmination of our workshop, and we're very sorry that we couldn't take any more questions due to limited time constraints. So, thank you so much for sparing time for us and enlightening us. Thank you so much, sir. It was really great to have you in this workshop.
Thank you, Siddharth, and thank you, IT, VIT, and it was a very uh, good experience I had with you people, and I wish all of you all the best. And just a word of advice before we sign off, not related to web security as such. I would only say that those of you who are on the verge of transitioning from students to working professionals, uh, the web development or application security or security, or for that matter any field, have do whatever you do it with passion. And once you do a thing with passion, then you are bound to excel in that. And go with an attitude of learning initial years. uh, Try and grasp as much as you can, because unless you and ask, be in the habit of asking questions, because you will realize when you step into the corporate world after the college, you will realize that whatever you would have studied in the college, on the face of it, you may not be, most of it you will not be seeing it. But let me tell you that whatever you have learned there, that is the foundation, and it will take you in good stride, and you will be able to apply that knowledge. And initial 3 4 years, make sure that you ask questions, because once you don't ask, later on when you become a little more experienced, you will feel a little shy about asking people. uh, so learn initial few years, and grow, and then sky is the limit for you people then. Thank you very much, and all the best to all of you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable inputs. We as students would definitely take that in mind and keep working forward in cybersecurity and all other domains. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session.
Thank you, all the best.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.